there's three things that sustain fire. It's oxygen, ignition, and fuel. There's only one of those things that we can control, and that is the fuel load.
Right.
And we are not doing nearly enough to do that. It's not just the state government. I mean, very, very clear about that. And it's not just this administration. It's Republican, Democrat administrations. Federal government is very much at fault as well.
Right.
So I have huge issues with all of that, because the men and women that are on the ground fighting these fires know what needs to be done to take care of this, and it's not being done. I mean, it's super fun. You could throw in 100 firefighters at a fire, but when you're facing down a 60 to 100 foot wall of fire and you're holding an 1.5 inch hose, good luck.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Assemblyman Heath Flora down in the valley. Heath, welcome. How's it going?
It's great to be back. Good to see you again.
Yeah, great having you up here, up the 99. You know, I drove the 99 recently and I was very shocked. A lot of road construction going on, and a lot of angry voters talking about gas taxes and things like that. What's the mood in the valley right now?
Oh man, it's super frustrating for the Valley folks. You know, I think Sacramento, we tend to forget, you know, certainly my area, we're a community of commuters. And when we talk gas prices, it's public enemy number one for the Central Valley. Because a lot of our folks, even if you've got a great union job, or you're, you know, laborer or union, you know, electrician or whoever you may be going to the Bay Area, that really cuts into your cost of living and it really increases that significantly in your expendable income. So people are super salty about the gas tax for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you're in the valley, you're either a farmer or have some sort of business that requires fuel, or you know, as you're a driver. Yeah. You know, Gavin Newsom has announced this kind of windfall profit special section. Kind of what's been explained to you? What's that about? And kind of, you know, why are gas prices so high in California versus the rest of the nation right now?
Yeah, honestly, I think what the governor's doing is kind of a joke. With all due respect, I mean, it's just political theater. For so many of us that have followed this for so long, there is absolutely things that we can do. And even the timing that he put on December 5th, what happens between now and December 5th, there's no immediate relief coming at all. So it is political theater. And, you know, you talk to the people that are in the industry, the people that have actually spent their lives, you know, studying this and trying to keep gas prices low. Every policy that we've passed, you know, since I've been elected has done nothing but reduce supply. I mean, let's be honest, this really comes down to supply and demand problem. We have the ability to increase supply, which ultimately lowers the cost, but the demand is not dropping right now. And so when there's a reduced supply and increased demand, obviously prices are going to go up. For many years, we have just hammered the industry, hammered them because we have a political ideology, an environmental ideology that we're pushing towards. And I'm not even, you know, going to argue that. But one of the things that we've said from day one is we need to slow this thing down. Because at what cost? I mean, the very people that my colleagues swear up and down that they care about, the low income, the underserved, what happens to those communities when it's $7 a gallon for gas and they have to drive to work? They don't have the ability to make more money. They're doing the best that they can. And now they're in food lines. I mean, they're literally at just going brain dead on the name, but like these, not soup lines, but basically organizations that can provide cheap food. And so you have families that are just absolutely being decimated, and really, you know, the political theater that we're doing is sort of insulting to a lot of us.
You know, it's interesting. I saw like a graph on Twitter and it showed like the gas prices all around the country, and like California has the highest. It just isolated has that like the highest gas per gallon. It was like by $2 or $3. Yeah. Why is gas here so much more expensive than anywhere else? Just
the regulatory burden that we put down on the industry. I mean, obviously SB1, you know, a few years ago was a significant gas tax. Cap and trade, you know, had a little bit of a gas tax in there as well. And then quite frankly, it's just the constant regulatory battle that we put in and the reduced supply. Even this year, you know, we passed a setback bill, which shut down any wells that are within 3,200 feet. I shouldn't say any well, you can't rehab a well or drill a new well within 3,200 feet of a residence or a business or a school or anything like that. Well, that is going to be a 30% reduction in the supply in California.
Right.
So all we have done is reduce that supply. And once again, I mean, it's simple economics, supply and demand. If you reduce supply and have the same or increased demand, prices are going to go up. The only way that we can do this is increase our supply.
Well, it's interesting. It seems like California requires a different type of gas than anywhere else in the nation. I think we just recently saw a letter from the CEO of Valero, kind of written in response to the governor's special session request, where he kind of details like why gas is so expensive here. Can you kind of talk to us about, how we have a different gas and why it makes it so much more expensive than Nevada's gas?
Yeah, and we have a clean carbon standard, a clean fuel standard. We have the summer blend.
Right.
We have all these different special blends that we tend to use, and I think, quite frankly, it's debatable of how effective they are in reducing our carbon output as a community. And I think Scott, from Valero did a very good job of detailing that and really laying out there just the absolute facts. And I think one of the things that people don't understand is we don't have that many refineries in the state anymore. And right now there was 5 refineries that are currently offline, 3 for scheduled maintenance, 2 for unscheduled maintenance. But over the last number of years, we have not allowed the oil industry to store anything, to refine anything and put it next door. We shut down majority of the storage around the Bay Area. We shut down the majority of storage in LA. So when there is an increase in demand or a refinery goes offline for scheduled or unscheduled maintenance, we have nowhere to go.
Right.
Like we're absolutely hosed. So there is a lot of dynamics in the fuel, and calling a special session for a windfall tax. I mean, whatever. Like is that the precedent that sets? So any industry in the state of California that actually makes money at some point, are we going to call a special session on them?
Right.
Like in tax? I mean, it just seems like the precedent is just ridiculous. And quite frankly, it does nothing for the citizens of California. It will not change anything. So I think it's just, once again, it's political theater.
Yeah. You and your colleagues have kind of, for the past year, have called for like a gas tax reprisal or relief. Kind of, how much do Californians pay in taxes per gallon right now?
Man, I'm not gonna know that number off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but it's in the $1.50, $1.60 range.
Really, it's that high? Wow.
Yeah, if we could Google pretty quick, and somebody's watching could Google real quick, but it is a significant amount.
So it's over $1 though.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't get gas anymore.
You got the EV. Listen, and that's where I think I love where the EVs market's going. I think it's super important, but I also think we have to be honest about where we're at. I mean, our valley does not do EVs. I mean, I'm sorry, farmers don't have EV trucks that can pull anything, that can haul anything. There's not electric tractors right now. I mean, that technology will come. We'll get there. I have no doubt about that. But it's not happening overnight. It's not happening in the next 5 years.
Right.
And until then, we cannot just keep jacking up the price of gas. Because eventually, I mean, if it costs a farmer to raise a gallon of milk or a head of lettuce X, they're going to pass that cost down.
Right.
And it's going to do nothing but increase the cost of living.
Yeah. So you're part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, right? And some of the things you guys are working on is kind of this kind of real world scenario, right? Like, yes, we like talking about the future and technology and things like that, but what's here and available today and achievable and doable, right? And so a lot of talk is about like hydrogen or natural gas and things like that. Kind of where are we on these kind of replaceable technology that is clean, but also kind of here today versus a dream?
Yeah, it's a great question. It wasn't that long ago we were in Portugal looking at renewables, and we were talking to their foreign ministers over there. And for instance, just Portugal, for instance, they accept everything, whether it's geo, whether it's hydro, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's nuclear. They love everything renewable. California, we only care about 2 things. We care about wind and we care about solar. And we do not have enough of either one of those to supply the grid. And so we have this weird infatuation with those 2 markets. And I'm not saying either one of them are bad. Like, do not, misunderstand me. But if we are going to meet the goals that the legislator has set, we are going to have to look at other renewable energy sources, including geo, including, hydro, quite frankly, including nuclear. I know nuclear, we just passed that, extended Diablo for 5 years. But if that would have went down, we'd lost 7% of our energy, right? 7% overnight. That's a huge, huge number. So at some point, the environmental left is going to have to come to their senses. Like, we can't do this overnight. We cannot meet the goals with wind and solar. And quite frankly, wind. Yeah, I'm not so sure that there's enough lithium to support that industry for the foreseeable future anyways. Right. And I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole too, but you want to talk about environmental damage, it is a big problem to mine that stuff too. So I think we got to be very honest about renewables. I think they're super important to our future. I think it's a good direction for us to be headed, but I think we just need to have that open and honest discussion about it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're saying this, especially in Europe right now with the Ukraine war and Russia shutting off the natural gas, and they're having this kind of panic moment of, oh crap, we don't have enough electricity, and they're shutting their nuclears down. And as you said, you pointed to Diablo, right? Like we had that same kind of moment. Instead of closing it down, we were like, maybe we should keep it open.
Like, oh crap.
Right.
Like we need that.
There seems like this belief is like, if our goal was to have clean air today, we have that technology, but because it might be, nuclear, it might be hydro, it might be not this perfect wind or solar thing. Do you think your colleagues are finally kind of having this kind of come to Jesus moment where they're realizing that there's other stuff out there that we might have to kind of compromise on what is renewable?
I would like to say yes, but no, I don't think so right now. I've served on natural resources pretty much the entire time I've been elected, been vice chair for the last number of years.
Right.
And I do not see a movement in that. I mean, in all these committee hearings and all, that we go through every year, no, there just really isn't a huge movement to accept any other technologies. And I think, the majority party, and certainly not all of them, I want to make that very, very clear, they have to at some point put the environmental justice community on quiet time. They do. And I know they're politically very important to them, and I respect that. But it's just like there's certain times things Republicans have to put some of our groups on quiet time.
Right.
Like, stop. Like, there's going to be a happy medium here. They need to do the same to that group because there is a pathway forward. There is. But that idea of, letting perfect be the enemy of good, I feel like that is absolutely where we're at with renewable energies.
Right. It's kind of interesting. We just talked about EVs a little bit, how, really they're not at that point where a farmer could use it to tow anything or haul anything. And just like the F-150 Lightning came out, it can tow like maybe 75 miles with a load in it. Yeah. So, it's just not realistic for the community yet. Yet we have these standards that, by 2035, we have to meet this. And we just don't have the infrastructure, or it seems like a will to get things there that fast. Kind of what do you see going down the pipe here, kind of with relation to the 2035 limit for EVs and things like that? And how are we going to meet that? I
mean, we're going to have to incentivize technology to come up. I mean, obviously that Ford Lightning is an incredible truck. I mean, I had the privilege of driving one, and it's awesome. I mean, it is a great truck, but you're absolutely right. Like, no farmer is going to buy it right now.
Right, $100,000.
And get 75 miles out of it under load, right? Yeah. That's just not happening. Now, it's a great, if you want an EV, if you're a guy that runs around town and just needs a truck for home, like it's a perfect vehicle for that. But I think there has to be this understanding, which if you look at where the majority of the electeds are, they're very, obviously urban, San Francisco, LA. We have to get those folks to understand that this technology is great and it's good, but it does not work for our area, and we need about 5 years. Yeah, I really think the industry, is close, but it's just not there yet. And I don't want to do anything to derail that. Like, that is certainly not my intentions, and I think it's ultimately probably good. Right. But there has to be this calming period where we just say, okay, listen, we're on the right track. I think those goals are pretty ambitious, but I think they can be met. And I think the other thing that is sort of frustrating for guys like myself that want free markets to kind of take control, like, we as elected, like, set the goal. Okay, the building set the pathway, set the goal, but then allow the industries to meet those goals and get out of our way. Let people do their jobs and quit nitpicking on that. Like, if you want to be this goal, like, fine, do that, but then let us do our job. It's like being a boss and micromanaging everybody. Like, you as a boss, like, this is the direction you want to go, right? These are the goals. I don't really care how we get there. Right. As long as the goal is met. And I think we, as a building, as electeds, we tend to want to micromanage some of these things, and it really slows down progress. It does directly opposite of what they're actually acting for. So
yeah, that's interesting. Something that's been, I guess, top of mind for many years and is fires, right? You come from a firefighting background. Knock on wood, we haven't had it that bad this year in comparison to the last 3 years, but still, we're having big fires. Kind of, are we doing enough to kind of, prevent these fires, and do we have enough to stop them when they start? Like, for example, we just had this one up in Placer County, El Dorado County, that seemed to rage for a week, and luckily the smoke didn't blow down this way, but we still lost, millions of acres. Are we on the right path to kind of solving this wildfire issue?
No, we're not. Yeah. No, and once again, I go back to the political theater. For those of us that have actually worked in the industry, I mean, and we talked about this last time I was on there, you know, there's three things that sustain fire. It's oxygen, ignition, and fuel. There's only one of those things that we can control, and that is the fuel load.
Right.
And we are not doing nearly enough to do that. It's not just the state government. I mean, very, very clear about that. And it's not just this administration. It's Republican, Democrat administrations. Federal government is very much at fault as well.
Right.
So I have huge issues with all of that because the men and women that are on the ground fighting these fires know what needs to be done to take care of this, and it's not being done. And it's super fun. You could throw in 100 firefighters at a fire, but when you're facing down a 60 to 100-foot wall of fire and you're holding an 1.5-inch hose, good luck, right? Like, it's not going to stop. So until we manage the fuel load, until we keep the intensity of these fires lower, the state does not lack for resources right now.
That was my question. Is it a resource issue?
It's not a resource issue.
A lot of people question the budget this year, that there wasn't enough spent on fire prevention.
Yeah.
So it's not a resource issue. What is it? It's a you just can't go in there and cut dead trees now?
Yeah, I mean, Sierra Club will be all up in your business if you go in there and, God forbid, cut a tree down or put fire on the ground. I mean, the Native Americans for thousands of years managed the forest by low intensity fires, right? It's part of the health of a natural forest. There's some incredible pictures of the Yosemite Valley then versus now.
Right.
And it's a completely different valley, completely overgrown. But we're not allowing the foresters to do their job, and it's all political. And that's the sad part, and I think, the governor did a great job. And the resources, the money that he put into CAL FIRE, to buy the new equipment. I mean, even the ability to fight fires at night with aircraft is a huge deal. When the humidities are high and the winds are down, you can make a lot of progress on fires at night. And so that technology is super exciting. I think they're doing some work on early detection. That's super good, right? But until we actually deal with the vegetation load, we're going to have the same issue because the state throws, absolutely a ridiculous amount of resources. When I was with CAL FIRE, if you called 911, if you were driving up to Yosemite or Tahoe and you called 911, there was a roadside grass fire, you were going to get 2 fixed-wing aircraft, a helicopter, 2 con crews, 5 engines, and a battalion chief on the initial dispatch.
Wow.
Plus the command air, an air attack. So we don't lack for resources, and that's on the first call. And then heaven forbid, if you call for a second alarm, then you're getting a lot more.
Right.
So if we give our men and women that are out there on the front lines the opportunity to catch these things early on, then we can reduce this. But until then, we're going to burn the state to the ground and wonder why.
Yeah. Just if I could ask you quickly about kind of Proposition 30s out there, and it's selling this messaging of we're going to help prevent wildfires, we're going to create funding, and we're going to create funding for electric charging and things like that, taxing only the wealthy 0.2%. Where would that money go to fighting fires? You're saying it's not a resource problem; it's a will problem.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that's why a lot of people are skeptical of 30 because nobody really knows. I will say a lot of people like to get public safety firefighters on different ballot initiatives because
you guys are popular, huh?
It looks good and people want to take care of them.
Right.
But I cannot tell you where it's actually going to go.
Right.
And I think there's also a big reason why I think the majority of these propositions are probably going to fail this year.
Yeah.
I do. Just because not a lot of people are trusting it right now.
Yeah. And part of, a lot of these wildfires they're talking about is the lack of water we've had in the recent years. And water is always an important issue down in the valley. Kind of what are some of the things that, we're doing well with water right now and that's helping the valley out? And what are some things you think we need to keep working on?
I would say transitioning from above ground water storage. Obviously that's a huge fight, Sites Reservoir. I do think we're going to get that done. The governor seems to be kind of re-engaging on that, which I'm super excited about. And if he can push some of his agencies forward and kind of put his finger on the scale a little bit, I think that'll happen, which will be a big deal. But I think where farmers have partnered up, different irrigation districts have partnered up with the environmental community, is that below ground water storage, creating wildlife, refuges. On top of that, basically recharging the aquifers underneath us.
Right. I
think that is something that you've seen in the last number of years really increase. And I think that's super, super helpful, where you can flood a rice field, let it absorb, get back into the aquifers. and really start that groundwater recharge project. So I think we're doing a lot of quality work in the groundwater recharge area.
And then what about, like, there seems to be this constant fight over the delta and water and how much water should go down to the valley.
Yeah.
You always see the great billboards down in the valley. What's the latest status on that? And do you believe we're doing enough to get water down to the valley versus sending it out to the ocean?
I think to the valley, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not obviously not a supporter of the tunnels. I mean, that's just something that's like public enemy number 3 in my area. It's a huge deal. And it's been really quiet, honestly. Like, I don't think that has been a priority with the governor. I think actually the administration needs to be applauded. I think, was it yesterday? I saw a tweet from Secretary Crowfoot that they approved, the Coastal Commission approved that desal plan.
Yeah, I was shocked by that.
You and me both.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that we've been screaming at for years. It's like, why do they have to take our water when they have the ability to do something down there as well? Take the pressure off of us. So I think that is a really exciting development. And I don't know, was it 6 months ago that the Coastal Commission killed a project?
Yeah.
And so to have that kind of refired back up and to get one approved, I think is a big deal. I
think they said like 5 million gallons a day or something like that they could do.
I think it was
some crazy rate. I was like, wow. So you think that takes pressure off the valley? That
Absolutely.
More water down there will mean more water for you up there.
Absolutely. I mean, if let's just use that 5 million, gallons a day, that's 5 million gallons less than they take from us.
Right.
And it's just the way it is. And so, yeah, that absolutely takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
And we need more of that, obviously. So I think with the groundwater recharge, with some storage projects, with desal, there's an absolute fix. And I have been on record a long time saying if the governor fixed 2 things in California, he could be president. It's homelessness and water.
Right.
And those are not easy issues. But my goodness, like, those are big, big problems that are complicated.
Right.
And I would love to see a little more energy put into both of those.
No, well said. It's interesting. We've had some water experts on talking about the valley and talking about kind of the canals and how it's moved and things like that. And they basically said the path we're on right now, that in 10 years or 15 years, we're going to lose like 1 million acres of farmable land in the valley. Mm-hmm. Is that something you're working on or knowledgeable about, and kind of what can be done? And as you said, as gas is going up, farmers aren't going to be able to farm as much. We're just going to get smaller and smaller farmable acres, and prices are going to go up. So what can we do to kind of reverse that?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, water's the key, right? It wasn't that long ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I was driving down to the Central Coast, San Luis Obispo area to see our colleague, Mr. Cunningham. And I was shocked at the amount of trees that were being pushed over along I-5. I mean, I've driven that road thousands of times in my life. I mean, I grew up farming in Kern County and always lived in Modesto. And so driving that, I mean, just back and forth all the time. And this is the first time I was like noticeably like there's a lot of acreage being pushed over. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, to be very, very blunt. A lot of folks a lot of investment companies bought really, really cheap dirt, put a commodity in there that made money, that didn't have the water to support it, and now they're done. And so I think there is going to be a balancing out of all of that. I mean, my family's been in the almond industry my entire life. I think my dad started in like 72 or something. And so we've been in it a long time, and that the industry needed to kind of regulate a little bit. And I think it has. And so I'm encouraged by that, where you can't buy ground at $5,000 to $7,000 in the middle of Fireball, which is relatively cheap dirt with no water rights, and then get ticked off when the water's gone. Right. I mean, it's just like, I'm sorry, like the farmers that have done things the right way for many, many years, there's a reason why their property is worth a lot of money. It's because they have water and they've protected it. And it's very important. That's why when you hear people thinking about taking water rights from farmers in my area, like people will lose their everlasting minds when that comes up. Right. And they should. I mean, these are water rights that have been around for, 100 plus years, and it's super, super valuable to them.
Yeah. So, that's interesting. Yeah. You never think about that, but when you're driving through on the 5 or through that, you do see, trees turned over and areas for sale. And I was thinking the exact same thing. Like,
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, almonds are. I mean, I'm very, very biased to them. I love them. I think they're a great commodity. But even if you go into like a a soybean or a lettuce or row crops, tomatoes. All those things take water to grow. And if we continue to reduce the farmable, ground because of our reduced water supply, we do have a major problem. There was a professor from the University of Iowa. We were at a cattleman's thing, and I won't be able to remember the entire analogy he made, but he basically had a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper as like the entire surface of the earth. And when he did this whole series on it, but at the end of the day, there was a business card portion when he folded it all up that was actual farmable ground in the entire world.
Wow.
When you look at it in that perspective, and the world population is continuing to increase, and the California farmland is the breadbasket of the world. We have the highest quality, the highest regulations. We produce the most per acre of any commodity.
Right.
And so it is something that we really need to take a special look at, because what we have here cannot be reproduced anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, it used to seem like, in the past, like California agriculture was really celebrated and it was kind of taken care of and recognized as, the main engine of the state. And now it kind of seems like a second tier, like, oh, we like to talk about tech. We like to talk about stuff we're doing in aerospace, but, it's kind of forgotten, especially, I know how that's how ag feels up here. What can ag do to kind of regain its foothold and kind of, bring attention to the fact that they are such an important industry to this state and the things they bring to not only the state, but the world?
I think ag for many years was scared to engage with politicians. Like, get out of our lives, out of sight, out of mind. Don't bring them in because they're scared of what you'll basically regulate on top of them, right? Over the last decade, 15 years, ag has made tremendous strides forward on how they grow, the efficiencies. I mean, the engine replacement program that, we work through with Cap and Trade, like all of these programs that they have bought into, ag has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of anymore. And, I am super bullish on getting the ag industry to re-engage and tell their story. Because let's be very, very honest, like in Sacramento, if you're not pushing your narrative, somebody's going to create a narrative about your industry, and more than likely it's going to be wrong. I mean, and it's not their fault. Like, I do not expect an LA urban legislator to know how to farm.
Right.
Like, I don't understand their issues. Like, it's perfectly fine and acceptable to me, but we have to do a better job of educating them, and they have to do a better job of listening and not coming in with a strong ideological bent because they read something that they saw a Netflix special, pushed out by some animal rights activists or some anti-farming group, right? That just wants to grow soybeans and tofu, in greenhouses.
Right.
Like, there's a perception that we have allowed to be painted that is completely false. And it's up to ag to take that back, because I'm telling you, the farmers in the state are some of the best in the world, and they should be very, very proud of what they do.
And it's kind of like, someone else pointed out, it's kind of like, where do you want your food to come from? Yeah. From here, locally, grown under the laws and beliefs we have as a state, where, people are paid a fair wage. We're using, proper fertilizers and things like that. Or you want your food to come from, China or somewhere else where it's imported. It's not sustainable. It's not fresh, and coming kind of secondhand. So.
Absolutely. And it's the same concept we have with oil, right? I mean, we have some of the strictest refinery, whether you're refining it or pulling it out of the ground. I mean, all of those rules and regulations that we put in, like, they're the strictest in the world. But we're reducing that, but we're still importing just as much. So we're taking it from these countries that have human rights violations, have environmental violations, and we act like, we don't want to talk about that.
Right.
So there is this weird dynamic that as long as we don't see it, like, we feel good about ourselves. But it doesn't mean it's not happening somewhere else. It's just not happening right in front of our face.
Right.
So,
that's interesting. So we're coming up on an election year. The Republican caucus, how are you guys looking right now? How are you guys feeling going into the election? Do you think you guys are going to grow a little bit, stay the same? What's the thoughts there?
I will say the Republican caucus is super excited about where we're at. I'm co-chair of the election team with Assemblymember Fong. Obviously, Gallagher is our boss, as our leader. And we're excited. I've never seen in the time that I've been elected an election team so engaged with each other. Our conversations are always fiery and fun, and we always come to an agreement on everything. So for the first time, I do feel like we are pulling on the same end of the rope, and we're largely part of by Gallagher's leadership, letting a lot of us do our jobs. and being successful at that. So I'm super, super excited about this election cycle. It's like the first election that I'm not freaking out, when it comes November election day, like how many are we going to lose? Like we will be devastated if we do not pick up seats. And we have some really, really good opportunities up and down the state, and even seats that, people may think that we're not going to win right now. I mean, obviously it's up to the voters on election day, but if you would have told any of us on election team that a year ago that we'd be where we're at today, we would have taken it in a heartbeat.
Right.
So we're super excited. Our candidates are working their tails off.
Who are some of the candidates you're most excited about right now?
Juan Alanis out of the Central Valley, Mark Pazin out of Adam Gray's seat, Greg Wallace out of Chad Mays' seat, Matt Rahm. I mean, Bill Asaley. Like I can go through the whole list, and there's not one that I'm not excited about. Honestly.
Even Joe Patterson. You're excited about Joe Patterson?
I mean, let's not get crazy. I hope Joe's listening. No, I love Joe. I mean, absolutely. I mean, Joe is one of those guys that's even now, and just kind of put a little plug into Joe. Like when Joe's, by all intents and purposes, should win that seat.
Right.
And he's already like financially supporting other candidates. Which is super exciting. I mean, and that's the kind of team players that we need in Sacramento. When we start getting people that hoard their financial abilities, hoard their money, for like personal, selfish reasons, like that does not benefit the team. And so having a guy like Joe, who is already from day one, before he's even elected, being a team player, is exactly what we're looking for in our caucus. So I had to bust his chops a little bit, but I love Joe a lot.
What was this, your 6th year now?
Yeah, finished up 6.
So like you've taken on this role as like the chief objector on the floor, right? How did you get that role? And, do you know all the rules to object, or did you have to learn it on the fly? How'd that kind of work out?
I lost a bet to get the role. No, Waldron, when she was leader, made me her floor leader, which I was happy to do. And it's fun. It's a great job to be in. As a guy that I'm not a real partisan guy, and I have fun with it. I mean, I talk to Eloise, the majority leader, all the time on things that we're going to object to, and there are like standard issue objections, like if they're wharfing bills, or if there's certain standard things that we do,
right?
And then there are certainly some things that we learned on the fly. There's a lot of procedural games that you can play if you want to just jam up the wheels of time. Not typically my style. I think the floor is a very sacred place, and I'm very much an institutional guy. So I don't really want it to turn into a, theatrical performance.
Right.
That's just not how we are. But there is absolutely times that we can play the games, and both sides do it. But I will say there's a lot of collegiality between, majority leader and myself on the floor, and our floor teams, and how we work together, and certainly within the speaker's office. But then there are days that are a little bit salty, and I'll never forget, James, he was making all these motions on that gas tax. Obviously Republicans have been trying very hard to push a suspension of the gas tax, in which we all support. And one day James pushed just a little bit too hard, and he got a pretty proper earful from the speaker. And it was just hilarious. But like, that's kind of the emotion behind it, and some of the fun things that happen on the floor that very few people see. But it's like, at the end of the day, we're all really good friends, and sometimes like we just push each other's buttons a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I always think. Like, there are procedural things you could do to make them miserable, or like slow things down, gunk things up. But you guys don't seem to do it. And I was like, I wonder why they don't do it. And is that because you guys do have a working relationship, and I guess want to keep it that collegial?
Yeah, I mean, I think collegiality is lost in politics. And I think California does a really, really good job of balancing that out. Certainly some of our members, like to poke the bear more than others.
Right.
And I think there's absolutely a time and a place for that. But the day-to-day business of the people's house, I think there's a collegiality that needs to be first and foremost before political games. But once again, there's a time and a place that we play those games, and those are held for special occasions.
Right. Like, I don't know, like in DC, they have like even more procedural things you can do, like the filibuster, where you can just like talk nonstop for hours on end to delay stuff. Yeah. In
Assemblymember Calderon's last year, I forget the bill. And I was actually just talking to his chief of staff, Assemblymember Tom White, about that, because Ian pulled out just an obscure rule that they used to use a lot, and I had never heard of it.
Right. Yeah, because his dad was like the rule wonk.
Yeah. And so it was a bill that, if you had like 5 people make a motion and then you had 5 people seconded that had not spoke on the bill yet, you could stop debate on the floor. And I think we had every single Republican mic up to speak on the bill, and then Ian pulled this thing out. I'm like, oh, crap, I don't know what to do. So I walked up to him and just smiled. I'm like, oh, you got me, and it's just that kind of stuff. It's fun.
That's funny. Yeah, saved a lot of time that day, I guess.
Yeah, he did. And he was just like, I'm tired of this. He was like, we're shutting this down.
That's funny. Yeah. So, I guess this is kind of an interesting year because you got 30 some new members coming in. Yeah. A lot of change, and you've had a lot of these 12-year members coming into their last 2 years, a lot of people leaving, not being part of that group. And, I guess you're kind of part of this kind of the middle group, right? This 6, members who've been around for, 6 years or so. And you got a bunch of new members coming in, and, in the first time in a long time, there's talks about, who's going to be the speaker, what's the leadership going to look like. And, there, in May, there was even, kind of a big discussion about this. The whole day was set aside. And I noticed, when we were all kind of waiting to see what's going on, a lot of members from the Dem side were talking to you, kind of bouncing some thoughts off. Kind of, what are your thoughts about kind of the leadership and how things are going to look next year and where things stand right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a very interesting time in California's history. Speaker Brennan is the second longest speaker, next to Willie Brown.
Yeah.
He's been there a long
That's crazy.
time.
Yeah.
It is. And he's done a good job in a lot of ways. I consider him a friend. Obviously Robert Rivas has ambitions, and I am absolutely convinced on the day, that Friday, that Rivas, originally started talking about it or made it public,
right?
That if he would have called a vote that day, he'd be the speaker. I think Robert tried to do things the right way.
Right.
And if you're going to shoot the king, you better hit. And he missed. And so I think, the speaker solidified, rallied his troops, and the Republican perspective on that was just, listen, this is your family fight, not ours. We will help you get into a caucus. I mean, that was what, a lot of the conversations that was our commitment to them.
Yeah.
Was you guys need to get behind closed doors and sort this out. And that's it. When you're done, let us know. We'll stay in caucus, and as long as you need us to, it's fine. But this is your family fight. And so they went in and fought it out. And obviously the speaker and Rivas put out that joint letter of, right. I don't know.
Whatever that said.
Whatever that actually said. I think it's
right.
Whatever that was. So, and then, but it's not dead. I mean, this will be back in November, and you're seeing it play out significantly in the elections. Rendon, the speaker, or obviously the speaker, Rivas, are supporting their candidates, trying to solidify. To your point, there's going to be 30-ish new members coming in. They're going to need those votes because I think it's absolutely up in the air right now.
That's interesting because everyone's in hindsight, everyone's like, oh yeah, you don't do it unless you have it, unless you have the votes. And they're like, oh, why did Rivas do this if he didn't have the votes? But what you're saying is he did, but he just kind of came out and was a little too polite about it.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of votes that were somewhat situational, that if I'll support you if the speaker steps down. But when he didn't, that vote count got real soft real quick.
Right.
And I mean, that's the game of chess you play.
Right.
You hear stories of a lot of people who walked into different leadership fights that did not have the votes, but had, a significant number and basically bluffed their way or, played the game. But that did not work out the way that they thought it was going to.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating dynamic, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
No, it is.
The next couple months.
For Republican, I'm just sort of excited. We've been in leadership fights a lot since I've been elected. I mean, I've had 4 leaders.
I was about to say, is that it?
In 6 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just happy that our leadership is solid. The Republican caucus is solid. We're squared away. So we can kind of just sit back with our popcorn and
right. It seems like everyone wants to be speaker or thinks they can be speaker, but not everyone wants to be a Republican leader.
Well, no, I mean, for a long time, it's who wants to be the captain of a sinking ship?
Right, yeah.
That's not particularly awesome. But it also took somebody like Gallagher, who had the fortitude to, quite frankly, turn some things around. And it's absolutely no disrespect to my dear friend Marie, who did a great job for me. She was the longest serving speaker that I had. And I have absolutely no doubt that James will serve out the remainder of his time in the assembly as our leader. I just do. And I'll do everything I can to protect that, because he has a vision, and he's incredibly collegial, especially within our caucus. And that's important. So for us, like, I'm really excited about our future as a caucus, kind of where we're going, especially if we pick up a couple seats, which I anticipate we will. I mean, sadly, we're going to lose one right off the bat in Cunningham, which is just devastating to the state of California. This is the absolute downside of redistricting, is a guy that Dems, Republicans alike loved, is just not running again because he got drawn into a seat that was almost unwinnable, even with a guy like Cunningham. So that's the downside of it. But we've got a lot of quality members coming in. I think that we can get that seat back, or not that seat, but get that number back, and then increase our numbers by a few, and then it'll be exciting. Because at the end of the day, like, I mean, part of my job as a floor leader is I count votes, right? I mean, my world,
is that what you do?
My world revolves around 41 and 54, right? And so the more mod Dems, or more colleagues that we can work with, business-friendly Dems, mod Dems, more Republicans that we can get, the easier it is to keep those numbers together. And so it makes our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, it seems like the Valley is really interesting this year politically, and kind of all the races down like the Bakersfield up here to Sacramento, a lot of tight congressional seats and things like that. Kind of what are you seeing polling wise, and like in like races like Rudy Salas or Adam Gray and some of these seats that kind of seem like toss ups right now?
I mean, honestly, to not be generic, but honest truth is, you're absolutely right. Flip a coin in all of those seats. I mean, with the exception of Alan East, in the assembly, that 80-22, that's for all intents and purposes done. I mean, he's got a substantial lead there, so we feel really, really confident on that seat. Payson, flip a coin. Rudy Valadeo, flip a coin. Gray, Duarte, flip a coin. So much of it's going to depend on the voter turnout,
right? And
the get out the vote campaigns that both sides will run. But there is a ton of seats that I absolutely believe that are flip a coin one way or the other right now, because everything's within the margin of error.
Yeah. What do you guys, the Dems do such a good job of kind of going out and harvesting votes or picking them up. What are you guys doing to kind of counteract that, or to kind of pick up votes from your own voters? Because I know there was like this big push of don't vote by mail, vote in person. And that's kind of screwed up the numbers a bit for Republicans. So what are you guys doing to kind of unwork that a bit?
Yeah, I hate that we got backwards on that. That was something that we should not have gotten screwed up on. Instead of whining about it, I mean, let's be honest, like, there's been a lot of laws that were changed in our elections, right? Assemblymember Berman was chair of elections for a long time, did a good job. I don't always agree with the laws that were changed, but he did a good job of pushing his thought process through, right? So instead of crying about it, instead of whining about it, like, Republicans have finally just said, okay, let's go play the game. If they're going to, harvest ballots, then so are we. And so the churches have engaged. Like different, let's just be honest, like the gun stores, like different, like industries that are typically more prone for Republicans are starting to engage. Different communities, nursing homes, like that kind of thing.
That's
like,
interesting, yeah.
Like, so for a long time, like, well, it's just dirty, you're ballot harvesting. I'm like, okay, but it's legal and they're doing it. So we can either cry about it or we can go play the game like them. And we've done that. And so I think you're going to see more of that. And it is, I think the evangelical right has really, really activated, and those communities have done a good job of getting their congregations to vote, getting them to turn in their ballots, having, ballot boxes at churches to drop them off at, so it's easy for them. So it's exciting. So yeah, instead of whining about it, we're just playing the game.
That's interesting. Churches, I never thought about that, but yeah, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot
unions
of people
can do it. I guess a church can do it, right?
You can do it at a union hall. You can do it at a church.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So, we just had bill signing period. We got this kind of downtime for the election, and then, you're right back in the swing of things on December 5th, getting sworn in and starting that special session. What are you kind of working on yourself to look forward to for next year and things, for your district?
I mean, honestly, for us, the next, 20 20 some days till election. That's all we care about. I haven't even thought of bill packages next year. Some of the stuff that we've been working on for the last number of years, the veterans home, the foster, home for veterans, got signed by the governor this year. We've been working on that bill for 4 years now. Yeah. So I'm super excited about that. So some of the things that we've been working on we got done this year. So that's good. You will see us engage. I mean, there's always these battles on cap and trade dollars, budget plays, trying to make sure that the engine replacement program's properly funded, the things that support, ag is funded. There's always regulatory issues with pesticides that's coming down. Water, with some of the governor's commitments, to kind of streamline some of that, we're going to be very, very focused on that. And then, quite frankly, we tend as an office, like my office in general, to work around the edges in a lot of other legislation, because the majority party, all of my Democratic colleagues would prefer, I would say pretty much all of them would prefer to have a bill bipartisan. Mm-hmm. They just have it. I mean, it's collegial, right? Right. And so to identify those bills that we can, fix or tweak a little bit, put Republican support on it, make it bipartisan, that's kind of what we do a lot of as an office as well. So it's different than a cunning
facilitator.
Yeah. Jordan was brilliant. I mean, going after privacy and some of the massive, policy things, mm-hmm. That's kind of Jordan's deal. We're a little bit different than that. We kind of just facilitate and nibble around the edges and work with my colleagues on trying to make things, workable for industries. I mean, honestly, a lot of what we've done in the last few years is taken bad legislation and, working with the chairs of committees or committee consultants and saying, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, I'll support this. And I can probably get more Republicans to do that too. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Right. But just being a part of those conversations. And I kind of honestly prefer that.
Yeah. As we talked about earlier, you're part of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Mm-hmm. What is the Problem Solvers Caucus kind of looking forward to do and kind of working on right now? And why do you think the Problem Solvers Caucus is kind of a key to kind of California figuring out some of these issues in the future?
So the Problem Solvers, I think, is, it's a great group of people, first of all. And to be into the Problem Solvers, there's a very set of guidelines. Right. You've got to be there at the meetings. You can't miss more than 2 or you're out. You don't endorse or give money against your, any other problem solvers. It's a very tight knit group, and we will not do anything unless everybody agrees. And I think that's super, super important. You can't be situational to be in the problem solvers. And I think we need more of that. And so when you talk about things that we're going to do, Carlos and I are the 2 co-chairs on the Assembly side. Senator Newman on the Senate side. We're looking for a Republican co-chair on the Senate side, and we've got somebody in mind as long as the election turns out the way that we think. But the group of us coming together is exciting because we will set together not so much pushing out policy, but exactly what I do on nibbling around the edges, being a group of votes, a block of votes that if we do X, Y, and Z, then we as a group will support this. Right. Engaging in the committee process early on as a problem solver, having those because every Tuesday we have our meeting, right? And we talk about bills that are coming up, bills that we may or may not want to engage. We have those discussions. So engaging early on in the process, not just waiting for a floor fight, but engaging as problem solvers and as it develops to say, listen, if X, Y, and Z happens, then we go together as a group and holding that big block of numbers. Because let's be honest, the biggest thing is holding people, right? Yeah. Whether it's Democrats or Republicans, that's the hardest part of the job is making sure somebody doesn't get squishy or get scared. Right. So just holding people together. So the problem solvers have a very unique way of doing business. And I think it's going to only increase and get more refined. I mean, we're roughly a year into this thing, and this is obviously my first year of being the co-chair of it with Carlos, and I am super, super excited about it.
It was unique, as you said, it's your job on the Republican side to count to 41 and 54. Mm-hmm. And that's probably a unique perspective on the problem solver side too, right? Yeah. And so kind of what size does the problem solvers need to be a true effective kind of caucus in the Assembly?
I think that 15 to 20 number.
Because as you said, you can't have squishy people, and it's hard to get,
that's right.
You can't have 30 strong people, right? It just doesn't exist.
No, you're absolutely right. So 15 to 20, because I'm very comfortable. As a Republican, there's only 19 of us. But when I look at the Republican caucus, I look at us as a block of 19 votes that we start with, right? And then I can go work with the mods to find another 22 somewhere, right? So the problem solvers, if we have the 19 Republicans, there's maybe a few, obviously myself would be one of those votes, but then you have a couple problem solver members, that we can add to that. We start building this coalition of people that will stay strong. And then that number gets a lot easier to get to. And it is like, it's the fun part of the job. It's the checkers, trying to put the pieces together. And the more principled people that you have, the easier that is.
Right. Something I've noticed with you is that you have a lot of friends on the other side of the aisle. What is it about you? What are you doing where you're able to kind of branch over and kind of make these relationships with people who aren't a part of your party?
It's pretty simple for my mindset. My philosophy is like, there's only 19 of us.
Right.
I got to make 22 friends, 22 Democratic friends to get anything done. And early on, obviously I'm very close with a lot of those members, but when you come at it from a place of quite frankly, like kindness, like you're not a jerk to them. Like even when you give your floor speeches or you're debating a bill, it's not personal. You stick to the policy. You explain to them why, like my area, like why I have this worldview. It's okay that theirs is different than mine. And I think we lose some of that. Like for so long, we just think like, well, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, or vice versa. Right. And like, we can't talk. Well, no, that's nonsense. It's so much in life. Some of your best friends, you probably disagree with on issues, right? You don't dislike them. You don't hate them. It's the same way with politics. Like, yeah, we can absolutely disagree on something, but guess what? I might need you on a vote. So if I'm sitting here verbally punching you in the face and talking crap about you and being a jerk to you,
right?
Like, and then I expect you to vote for me, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, we're humans. Like, politicians are human beings.
So
like,
it's that simple. Just be nice to people and respectful.
It's a novel idea, right? Hey, don't be a jerk. like
that's it, huh?
That's it. Just don't be a jerk. Yeah. But it is. I learned a lot, in the 2 years that I served with Senator Cannella. How he conducted himself and, with his Democratic colleagues. And, Senator Tom Berryhill sadly passed away. Like those are some of the guys that I looked up to, and they were very effective Republican legislators. And so that's sort of how we kind of modeled it. And also like just the public safety background. Like our job is, we're in the people business. My job is to serve my community. I don't represent all Republicans.
Yeah.
And so the Democrats in my community deserve to be represented as well. So
No, well said. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to stop by, Heath. It's just great learning all this stuff, and best of luck to you guys in November, and hopefully things turn out well for you.
No, absolutely. And appreciate you inviting us back on, and we're always available, and I can't wait to get Joe Patterson in here and let him spew his wisdom.
Exactly. Well, I can't wait to see what surprises you have in store for these new members and Mr. Patterson.
Well, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So
a lot of freshmen to welcome to the legislature.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
So glad to be here.
All right. Thanks.